Halloween. There's no feeling quite like it.
Companies selling overrated pumpkin spice items, kids coming up to your door and asking to ransack your pantry, and being able to wear costumes in public without getting looked at funny. Halloween has everything. But of course, nothing stands out more this time of year than the essence of horror. Scary movies, horror-themed video games, all of it is trending as the October days wind down and Hallows Eve approaches. Fortunately for me, I'm not the kind of guy to play those horror games unless you count the first grader's definition of the word scary. So I get to relax and enjoy my Halloween with no scary stuff whatsoever. That's weird. I don't have a working doorbell. Okay. When the Xbox 360 was revealed and released to the world in 2005, it wanted to make a statement. It marked the beginning of the 7th generation of video game consoles and launched with several big titles defining the generation, including Call of Duty 2, Need for Speed Most Wanted, and Perfect Dark Zero. But there was one game that was released with the system in November of 2005 that most Xbox fans may not recognize, an action and survival horror game called Condemned: Criminal Origins. In this episode of Cartridges and Consoles, we'll take a look at this forgotten Xbox 360 launch title and see how its unique and innovative features made it stand out from other video games at the time. Condemned: Criminal Origins was published by Sega and developed by Monolith Productions, and is best described as a first-person psychological thriller horror game. You play as FBI agent Ethan Thomas, investigating the surge of killings and assaults in the city of Metro. However, things go horribly wrong when you're framed for the murder of 2 police officers, and now you must try to fight for your life while uncovering all the information you can on this developing case. Initially, you are armed with a pistol. However, upon losing it, you are forced to grab anything that you can and use it as a melee weapon. Pipes, 2x4 wooden boards, electrical conduits, shovels, crowbars, axes, sledgehammers, almost anything you see that can be pulled off a wall or is lying out in the open counts as a weapon. You can eventually get other guns and firearms in the game, but all of them come with a very limited amount of ammo and no ability to reload, so you have to be as conservative as possible with your shots once you find one. You can also use the gun as a melee weapon once it does run out of ammo, but it has low durability and, unlike typical melee weapons, is prone to breaking more easily. Some of the melee weapons, most notably the axe, the sledgehammer, the crowbar, and the shovel, also function as entry tools and are required to break down or open doors to progress, or even open safes to find better weapons. In addition, you're only allowed to hold one weapon at a time, and every weapon has 4 unique stats differentiating them from each other, meaning you have to pick the right weapon for the right situation. Alongside your basic weapon, you also have access to a taser to briefly stun any enemies from range, a kick attack to quickly try to force someone back, and the option to block incoming attacks as long as you can time it right. Outside of combat, you have access to your FBI forensic tools, including a UV light, a laser light, a sampler, a scanner, and a camera. These tools only activate in certain areas and allow you to collect data samples to send over to your lab assistant and colleague Rosa, who helps you reveal key evidence about the case at hand. Over the course of 10 chapters, you'll venture out to several different distinct locations and discover more and more about the rise in murders, learning that there's much more to this development than you may think. Now, this game does have some things it does right for me, and one is the story structure. It's a game with a very linear story. There's no real side quests you have to go on throughout your journey, and you can play knowing there's one set path to beat the game. As someone who's never played this style of game, this was a welcome sight, as I'm the kind of guy who tackles any side quest in sight, and seeing as there were practically none here, it made me feel confident that I only had to focus on one objective. Additionally, each of the 10 chapters is roughly 30 minutes long on average. There are some chapters that are shorter than that, and then there's the last 2 chapters which can take a bit longer to beat, but even with that you can finish the game within 5 to 6 hours, which means it's the perfect game for people who want a quickish game to beat. Plus, if you want a bit of extra gameplay, there's extra content in the form of collectibles and achievements. Each chapter has 6 birds and 3 metal scraps scattered throughout the area, and depending on how much of each you collect, you can earn Xbox 360 achievements. From getting only 1 bird per chapter and 9 metal pieces total, to all 60 birds and all 30 metal pieces, there are achievements of every kind. There's also achievements requiring you to check out TVs scattered through each chapter and obtain every melee weapon, firearm, and evidence piece in the game. And if you're up for the challenge, there's even achievements that require you to use only melee weapons. All of these achievements and collectibles also unlock items in the game's gallery, including concept art and models, and they give anyone who wants to grind out for everything a lot of replayability and extra content. I also think the visuals in the game are really innovative for 2005. Keeping in mind the fact that this was marketed as a launch title for the next generation of video games, the visuals and cutscenes look outstanding for the time, and with a bit of polish, I could probably even see the cutscenes looking almost like they're from modern-day video games. The only issue I have with the graphics is the lighting, which is adjustable in the settings, but sometimes it felt a bit too dark for me in specific areas. Alongside the graphics, this game's AI is also very innovative for the time. Typically, any enemy AI you face off against in a game will have a predictable pattern which you can exploit. But here, as illustrated by the first point on the back of the box, the enemy AI is nearly unpredictable, especially toward late game. They'll make weird moves that you wouldn't expect and try to trip you up to take advantage. I definitely had my fair share of times where I got thrown off by what the AI did compared to what I expected, and while somewhat frustrating, it ensured the combat phases always felt fresh and unpredictable. I also will say that for a horror game, there weren't as many jump scares as I expected. Any jump scares the game did have were well placed and evenly spaced from other jump scare points, and overall helped contribute to the game's atmosphere very well. And this is coming from a guy who's more jumpy than a kangaroo when it comes to anything that startles him.
Jesus Christ!
However, there are some things that the game unfortunately could do better, with one being the controls. The controls in the game are clunky and take a while to get used to, which I totally understand is an intentional move to try and add more tension throughout an already tense game, but it's just a bit too clunky for me. There were definitely moments I ran into where the clunky controls cost me big time in key situations, so in my opinion, a little bit of smoothing would have been better, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. In addition, the forensic tools you use in the game also leave a lot to be desired. These forensic tools, which like the AI are one of the key selling points on the back of the box, could have been utilized better as you're only allowed to use them in specific areas at specific times. What's worse, leaving the area, which is never clearly defined, automatically puts your tool away and puts you back in a combat stance. Plus, using the UV and laser light can be a bit confusing at times. The game says that anything scannable will glow in a green or blue light depending on the tool you're using. What doesn't help is these tools emit that exact light color on any surface you point them towards. Again, this could just be a lighting issue that I personally had trouble with, but it's still something that bothered me as it made it a hassle trying to find this piece of evidence the game was telling me existed. There's also one forensic tool I did not mention, the gas spectrometer, and a device that tracks down decaying organisms, which seems like it would have a good use. However, in all but one scenario throughout the entire game, this tool is used to track down the dead bird collectibles. It would have been cool if they were able to implement the tool in a better way and not just have it be for completely optional achievements 90% of the time, but sadly, that's just not the case here. Overall, Condemned Criminal Origins is an enticing and innovative game that helped make a statement with the Xbox 360's launch. The game does have some issues, but it's still a very welcoming horror game that, while forgotten, definitely has its place in the video game industry. It's definitely not the kind of game for me, But if you're into first-person action horror games of this type, it's a game you must try out, whether you were a fan of the Xbox 360 or not. Condemned: Criminal Origins on the Xbox 360 gets my rating of 7 cartridges out of 10.